Nathan's palm slammed into Victoria's face before the serving tray even had a chance to crash onto the ground. For a brief moment, the entire backyard froze in stunned silence. Paper plates stopped passing from hand to hand, the grill continued to hiss in the background, and spilled lemonade spread across the patio, soaking into Victoria's shoes. Nathan took a step toward her, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked like it might crack. "Don't you ever put your hands on me again." Victoria held her cheek with one trembling hand. "I didn't." "Clean up this mess," he barked, pointing at the drink scattered across the ground. "Then get out." Everyone had witnessed it, her cousins, her aunt, even her sister. Still, not a single person stepped in. A moment later Lauren walked over, but she didn't check on Victoria or ask if she was okay. Instead, she positioned herself beside Nathan as though he were the victim. "Apologize to him," Lauren said firmly. Victoria looked at her in disbelief. "Lauren, he just slapped me." Lauren's expression only grew colder. "Either apologize or leave." Victoria slowly glanced around the barbecue she had spent the entire morning helping organize. She looked at the folding tables, the trays of food, and the decorations she had paid for herself because Lauren once again claimed money was tight. Her throat felt painfully tight, but when she finally spoke, her voice stayed calm. "No." Several guests lowered their eyes. Someone quietly picked up a fallen cup without saying a word. Nathan let out a short, satisfied chuckle, as if her refusal somehow proved his point. Lauren stepped aside and pointed toward the backyard gate. "Then leave." Victoria walked across the yard while her cheek burned and her hands shook uncontrollably. Behind her, she heard Nathan mutter under his breath. "Always acting innocent." Not one person came after her. When she reached her car, her fingers fumbled with the keys. Just then, her phone vibrated inside her pocket. A notification lit up the screen. "Prescott and Pierce Estate Attorneys, urgent call requested." She barely noticed it through the tears she stubbornly refused to let fall. Behind her, the barbecue slowly returned to normal. Chairs scraped across the patio, someone forced an awkward laugh, and Nathan's voice floated above the crowd again, calm, relaxed, completely confident. Victoria sat behind the steering wheel, staring back at the house where her own sister had chosen a man's pride over the bright red mark on her face. She had no idea that only a few hours later, Nathan and Lauren would come home to discover something waiting on their front porch that would make everyone at that barbecue wish they hadn't stayed silent. She pulled away without turning on the radio. The silence inside the car somehow felt even louder than the sound of the slap. Every time she stopped at a red light, she caught sight of the faint red imprint on her cheek in the rearview mirror. She reached up and touched it once before quickly pulling her hand away. "I didn't even do anything," she whispered quietly to herself. Her phone buzzed again. This time she left it unanswered. By the time she arrived at her small townhouse, the anger had slowly drained away, leaving behind something far heavier. Pure exhaustion. She walked inside, set her keys on the kitchen counter, and leaned against it for support. Her eyes drifted to a framed photograph sitting beside the coffee maker. In the picture, she, Lauren, and their grandfather were smiling together in his garden years ago. Back then, Lauren used to throw an arm around Victoria's shoulders and proudly tell everyone, "She's my favorite little sister." Victoria let out a sad smile. So much for that. She lowered herself into a chair. The memories came rushing back one after another. She wasn't trying to think about them, they simply refused to stay buried. After Lauren returned to work following the birth of her first child, Victoria spent nearly every afternoon for almost a full year babysitting her niece. "I don't know what we'd do without you," Lauren had told her more times than Victoria could count. Victoria never accepted a single dollar. She genuinely loved spending time with her niece. Years later, when Nathan lost his job for several months, Lauren had called her in tears. Without telling anyone, Victoria quietly paid 2 overdue utility bills to help them get through. "Please don't tell anyone," Lauren had begged. "I won't," Victoria promised. And she never brought it up again. Then there were the birthdays, the Christmas dinners, the family reunions. Whenever decorations needed to be put up, Victoria always showed up early. If someone forgot dessert, she drove across town to buy one without complaining. If Grandpa needed a ride to another doctor's appointment, she cancelled her own plans without giving it a second thought. Over the years, she became the person everyone depended on whenever they needed help. Yet somehow she was also the easiest person for everyone to ignore. Nathan's cruel behavior hadn't started at today's barbecue. It had begun years earlier. First came the little remarks. Small cuts disguised as harmless jokes. Still single? You work way too much. You always try so hard. During family dinners, every time Victoria tried to join the conversation, Nathan somehow managed to interrupt her. Lauren usually laughed it off. Oh, that's just Nathan. If Victoria looked uncomfortable, Lauren would simply shrug. You know how he is. Eventually everyone else followed her example. Little by little, Nathan's disrespect became normal. Not because anyone believed it was right. Because nobody wanted the confrontation that came with standing up to him. Victoria remembered another family gathering from almost a year earlier. She had accidentally parked in Nathan's favorite spot near the driveway. He walked inside carrying his cooler and loudly announced to everyone. Guess some people still don't understand basic manners. The room burst into laughter. Without saying a word, Victoria went outside and moved her car. Not one person told Nathan he was being unreasonable. She had convinced herself for years that swallowing her pride was simply the price of keeping the peace. Today finally proved how wrong she had been. Her phone vibrated for the third time. This time, she picked it up. One new voicemail. She pressed play. Good afternoon, Miss Bennett. This is Samuel Prescott with Prescott and Pierce Estate Attorneys. Please return my call as soon as possible regarding the occupancy agreement connected to your grandfather's estate. This matter requires your immediate attention. The recording ended. Victoria frowned. She had hoped she wouldn't have to deal with any of this today. Especially not after everything that had just happened. She rubbed her forehead and stared at the phone for nearly a full minute. The last thing she wanted was another family conflict. But something inside her had shifted. Not only because Nathan had slapped her. Because Lauren had stood there, looked her directly in the eyes, and chosen humiliation instead of the truth. Finally, Victoria tapped the call button. The attorney answered almost immediately. Miss Bennett, thank you for returning my call. I received your voicemail. I'm sorry this comes during such a difficult day. There was a short pause. Has something happened? Victoria slowly let out a long breath. Yes. I understand. His voice became noticeably gentler. As I explained when your grandfather's estate was settled, the occupancy agreement allowing your sister and her husband to remain in the property included several specific conditions. I remember. One of those conditions specifically prohibits harassment, intimidation, or abusive behavior directed toward you. Victoria closed her eyes. I remember. If those terms have been violated, you are under absolutely no legal obligation to continue allowing them to live in the property. She didn't answer right away. The attorney waited patiently without rushing her. After several quiet seconds, Victoria finally asked the only question that truly mattered. If I decide today, can everything be handled legally? He didn't hesitate for even a second. Yes. Another long silence settled between them. Victoria glanced one last time at the fading red mark on her cheek before quietly making up her mind. Please move forward. The attorney's voice remained calm and professional. I'll begin the process immediately. The call ended. Victoria slowly lowered her phone onto the kitchen counter. For the first time since that afternoon, she wasn't trying to avoid the situation anymore. She had made her choice. And there was no taking it back. Meanwhile, someone flipped burgers on the grill as if the day had been completely ordinary. Children ran laughing across the backyard, chasing each other through the grass without a care in the world. Only the adults carried the weight of what had happened. Nathan stood beside the cooler with a can of soda in one hand, laughing louder than anyone else. "I'm telling you," he said with a shake of his head. "She's always been dramatic. She barely touched me, then acted like I was somehow the bad guy." A couple of cousins exchanged uneasy looks, but neither of them spoke. Nathan kept going. "Some people seriously need to learn what boundaries are. She brought this on herself." Standing beside him, Lauren nodded in agreement. "Exactly. She could have apologized, but she's too stubborn." An uncomfortable silence settled over the group. Finally, Aunt Diane crossed her arms. "Nathan," she said carefully, "I saw exactly what happened." He turned to face her. "So did everyone else. You slapped her." Nathan only shrugged. "And?" Diane frowned. "She was carrying drinks. Someone bumped into her." Nathan let out a dismissive scoff. "You didn't see it from where I was standing." "I saw enough." Before Diane could continue, Lauren stepped between them. "My husband doesn't owe anyone an explanation." Diane looked directly at her niece. "Your sister walked out of here with a handprint across her face." Lauren folded her arms. "And she could have avoided all of it if she'd just apologized." Several relatives quietly looked away. No one wanted another confrontation. Nathan smiled with complete confidence. "See? Even Lauren gets it." On the other side of the yard, quiet whispers slowly began spreading. "I've never seen him hit anyone before. That wasn't self-defense. Victoria didn't deserve that." A few relatives discreetly reached for their phones. One cousin texted Victoria, "Are you okay?" Another sent a different message. "I'm sorry nobody stood up for you." Nearby, one of the older uncles quietly spoke to his wife. "We should have said something." She nodded sadly. "We really should have." For the first time all afternoon, Nathan realized the mood had changed. People weren't laughing at his jokes anymore. They were simply waiting for the barbecue to be over. About an hour later, guests started gathering their belongings. People exchanged polite goodbyes, but the warmth that usually followed family get-togethers had completely disappeared. Nathan noticed. "Why's everybody so quiet?" No one answered him. Lauren forced a smile. "They're probably just tired." Nathan accepted that explanation without another thought. As they loaded the coolers into the SUV, he smirked to himself. "I guarantee Victoria calls tomorrow pretending none of this ever happened." Lauren let out a tired sigh. "She always comes around." "Exactly." He slammed the tailgate shut. People like her never stay angry for long. Certain the day had ended exactly the way Nathan wanted, they climbed into the SUV and drove home. Roughly 20 minutes later, Nathan turned onto their street. As soon as he saw the front of the house, he instinctively slowed the vehicle. "What's going on?" Lauren leaned forward in her seat. A white sedan was parked along the curb in front of their home. Behind it sat another unfamiliar vehicle. 3 strangers stood near the front walkway. One was a sharply dressed man wearing a navy suit and carrying a leather briefcase. Next to him stood a locksmith in uniform with a toolbox resting on the sidewalk. The third person wore the clothing of a legal courier and held a large sealed envelope. Lauren frowned. "Are they at the wrong house?" Nathan laughed. "They have to be." He pulled into the driveway, stepped out confidently, and walked toward them. "Can I help you?" The man in the suit offered a polite smile. "Good afternoon." He removed a business card from his pocket and handed it over. "My name is Samuel Prescott." After a brief pause, he continued. "I'm the attorney representing the owner of this property." Nathan frowned. "The owner?" "Yes." Lauren looked completely confused. "There has to be some kind of mistake." The attorney calmly looked at both of them. Before we continue, may I confirm your identities? Nathan folded his arms across his chest. I'm Nathan Reynolds. Lauren nodded. And I'm Lauren Reynolds. The attorney acknowledged them with a single nod. Thank you. He accepted the sealed envelope from the courier and placed it directly into Nathan's hands. Nathan looked down at the paperwork. The confidence on his face immediately began to disappear. Victoria's name was printed clearly across the very first page. What is this? Without raising his voice, the attorney met Nathan's stare. Before you enter the house. He gestured toward the envelope. You'll need to read the first page. Nathan ripped the envelope open with impatient hands. This is ridiculous, he muttered. Some kind of clerical mistake. Lauren stepped closer, trying to read over his shoulder. The attorney simply waited without saying a word. Across the top of the document, bold letters caught Nathan's attention. He frowned. What occupancy agreement? He turned the page. Then he stopped. His eyes froze on the words in front of him. Slowly, all the color drained from his face. Lauren reached for the papers. Nathan, what is it? He couldn't answer. She gently took the documents from his hands. The very first paragraph read. The legal owner of this property is Victoria Bennett, pursuant to the final probate order and recorded deed executed following the estate of George Bennett. Lauren stared at the page. No. She quickly turned to the next one. No. This can't be right. The attorney finally spoke. There has been no mistake. Nathan looked up, anger flashing across his face. My wife inherited this house from her grandfather. No, the attorney replied evenly. Your grandfather transferred ownership to Miss Victoria Bennett. The deed was legally recorded several months ago. That's impossible. It is fully documented. The attorney opened his briefcase and removed several certified copies. This is the recorded deed. He placed the first document on top of the envelope. This is the probate order. A second document followed. And this is the occupancy agreement that was signed after ownership was transferred. Lauren immediately recognized her grandfather's signature. Nathan recognized it too. Neither of them could deny what they were looking at. Lauren's breathing became uneven. I remember. The memory hit her all at once. A few months earlier, Grandpa had asked Victoria to drive him to several appointments. Nathan had laughed at the time. There goes Grandpa's favorite again. Victoria had simply smiled without saying a word. Another memory surfaced. During one family gathering, Grandpa had asked everyone to leave the room except Victoria. Lauren had assumed they were discussing medical paperwork. She never questioned it. Now every one of those small moments suddenly fit together. Victoria hadn't kept the truth hidden out of spite. She had simply honored her grandfather's request for privacy. Nathan snapped the papers closed. I don't care whose name is written on a piece of paper. He looked directly at the attorney. We live here. We've been living here for years. You can't just throw people out like this. The attorney gave a calm nod. Normally, an occupancy agreement remains valid until the date it expires. Nathan smirked. There you go. But the attorney wasn't finished. However, this particular agreement includes several specific conditions. He opened the document to a highlighted section. Condition 7. Lauren looked down at the page and read aloud, her voice shaking. Asterisk occupancy shall immediately terminate in the event of verified harassment, intimidation, physical violence, or abusive conduct directed toward Victoria Bennett. Asterisk. Her words trailed off. Nathan snatched the papers back. That doesn't prove anything. The attorney answered without raising his voice. It does when it's supported by evidence. Nathan crossed his arms. What evidence? The incident that took place earlier today. Nathan let out a sarcastic laugh. You weren't even there. No, the attorney replied. But many witnesses were. He handed Nathan another folder. Inside were written statements gathered that same afternoon from family members who had contacted Victoria after learning she intended to enforce the agreement. The first statement came from Aunt Diane. Then Uncle Thomas. 2 cousins. Even Nathan's own younger brother. Every statement described the same sequence of events. Victoria accidentally brushed against Nathan. Nathan slapped Victoria. Lauren demanded that Victoria apologize or leave. Not a single witness claimed Victoria had acted aggressively. The confidence disappeared from Nathan's face. This is unbelievable. He yanked out his phone. I'm calling everyone. He immediately dialed Uncle Thomas. Tell this lawyer he's wrong. Thomas's voice stayed calm. I'm not going to lie for you, Nathan. The call ended. Nathan immediately called one of his cousins. No answer. Next, he called Aunt Diane. She picked up almost immediately. You hit her, Nathan. I saw it with my own eyes. I'm not defending you. She hung up. One by one, every call ended exactly the same way. Some relatives ignored him completely. The ones who answered refused to back him up. The people who had remained silent at the barbecue had finally decided to speak. Lauren slowly sat down on the front steps. Tears filled her eyes. I told her to leave. She whispered. The memory replayed over and over in her mind. Victoria standing there completely alone. A bright red handprint across her cheek. Looking at her own sister for help. And finding none. Lauren covered her face with both hands. What have I done? The attorney looked at her with quiet sympathy. Miss Bennett didn't threaten anyone. She simply instructed our office to enforce the agreement that already existed. Nathan stared at the house. For the first time, it no longer felt like home. It felt like someone else's property. Because legally it was. He turned toward the front door. I don't care. I'm going inside. He took one determined step toward the porch. Before he could reach it, the locksmith quietly walked forward. Without saying a word, he removed the existing lock cylinder and installed a new one. The sharp metallic click echoed through the quiet evening. Nathan stopped in his tracks. For the first time that entire day, he had absolutely nothing to say. The sound of the locksmith's tools carried across the silent street. Nathan stood motionless, staring at the front door as though refusing to blink could somehow undo what was happening. It doesn't matter, he finally snapped. Victoria can't destroy our lives over one argument. The attorney calmly closed his briefcase before answering. This decision wasn't made because of one argument. It was made because the agreement your grandfather created anticipated exactly this kind of behavior. Lauren slowly raised her head. What do you mean? The attorney removed one final folder from his briefcase. Your grandfather instructed our firm to explain his reasoning only if the occupancy agreement ever had to be enforced. He opened the document. Mr. George Bennett believed Victoria should eventually inherit this property because she cared for him consistently throughout the final years of his life without ever asking for anything in return. Lauren lowered her eyes. The attorney continued. She drove him to every medical appointment. She organized his medications. She handled repairs around the house. And she spent holidays with him when everyone else said they were too busy. Nathan remained silent. The attorney continued. Your grandfather also wanted both of you to have time to become financially secure. That's why he created a temporary occupancy agreement instead of requiring you to move out immediately. Lauren's voice barely rose above a whisper. He was trying to help us. Yes. But he included one condition he considered absolutely non-negotiable. The attorney looked directly at Nathan. He told us that he had witnessed your temper on more than one occasion. He specifically instructed us that if Victoria was ever threatened, intimidated, or physically harmed by either occupant, the agreement would end immediately. Lauren covered her mouth in shock. So Grandpa expected something like this. The attorney answered quietly. He hoped it would never happen. But he prepared for the possibility. For a long time, nobody spoke. Nathan's shoulders slowly sagged. Every ounce of confidence he had carried since the barbecue disappeared. He wasn't angry anymore. He simply looked defeated. I never thought she'd actually go through with this. The attorney gently corrected him. She didn't. You did. Nathan frowned. What? You made your choices this afternoon. Miss Bennet simply exercised a legal right she already had. Those words settled heavily over the driveway. For years, Nathan had lived as though his actions would never have real consequences. That belief ended today. Lauren wiped the tears from her face. I need to talk to Victoria. The attorney gave a small nod. Whether that happens is entirely her decision. With trembling hands, Lauren pulled out her phone. She stared at her sister's name on the screen for nearly a full minute before finally pressing the call button. The phone rang. Then it went to voicemail. Lauren swallowed hard before speaking. Victoria. Her voice cracked. I'm so sorry. I should have stood beside you. I should have stopped him. I kept choosing peace with my husband instead of choosing what was right. She paused, struggling to hold back her tears. You needed a sister today. And I wasn't one. When the message ended, she hung up without expecting a call back. Deep inside, she already knew that saying sorry couldn't erase what had happened. During the following week, Nathan and Lauren packed their belongings and moved out according to the deadline listed in the legal notice. There were no dramatic confrontations. No courtroom fights. Everything unfolded exactly the way the occupancy agreement required. News of what had happened spread quickly throughout the family. One after another, relatives who had witnessed the barbecue reached out to Victoria. Aunt Diane apologized for waiting too long to speak up. Uncle Thomas admitted he had stayed silent because he wanted to avoid conflict and now deeply regretted it. Several cousins confessed they had always been uncomfortable with Nathan's behavior but never had the courage to challenge him. Victoria accepted every apology with quiet grace. She didn't criticize anyone. She didn't lecture them. She simply thanked the people who finally chose honesty. As for Nathan, invitations to family gatherings became noticeably less frequent. People no longer laughed when he made cruel remarks. Watching him slap Victoria in front of everyone had permanently changed the way the family saw him. The influence he once enjoyed quietly disappeared, not because Victoria wanted revenge, but because the truth had finally caught up with him. A month later, Victoria unlocked the front door of the home her grandfather had placed in her care. She didn't try to erase everything that had happened there. Instead, she chose to honor the memories that truly mattered. She repaired the weathered porch railing her grandfather had always planned to fix but never got around to finishing. She planted fresh flowers in the front garden where he used to spend quiet mornings enjoying the sunshine. Inside the house, she painted the walls in the warm colors he had once said would make the place feel even more welcoming. Little by little, the house began to feel different. For the first time in a long while, it felt peaceful. Not because it was empty. Because fear no longer lived there. Victoria also made another change. She stopped automatically saying yes every time someone asked her for help. She no longer believed she had to sacrifice her own dignity just to earn someone's love or approval. If people treated her with kindness and respect, she was happy to help them. If they didn't, she simply walked away. And this time, she did it without feeling guilty. By the end of the summer, Victoria invited a small group of relatives over for a barbecue in that very same backyard. This gathering couldn't have been more different from the one she had walked away from only weeks before. People laughed together without making anyone the target of a joke. Children ran happily across the lawn. The conversations came naturally, without tension or awkwardness. Respect had replaced the hostility that once filled the yard. As the sun slowly dipped below the horizon, Aunt Diane handed Victoria a plate of grilled vegetables and smiled warmly. Your grandfather would have been proud of you. Victoria looked around the backyard. She admired the flowers blooming in the garden. She looked at the relatives who had chosen compassion instead of silence. Then her eyes rested on the home her grandfather had trusted her to protect. A quiet smile spread across her face. Walking away from that first barbecue hadn't been the moment she lost her family. It had been the moment she finally stopped accepting a version of family that demanded her silence while excusing cruelty. The day she chose self-respect over keeping the peace was also the day she began building the calm, secure life her grandfather had always wanted for her.